Hello. I'd like to call the March 10th, 2026 Planning Commission regular meeting to order. The Planning Commission is holding hybrid meetings. Members of the public can attend, are we, okay, can attend the meeting in person or observe the meeting on Zoom online by visiting www.cityofarcata.org and following the live meetings link at the bottom of the city's homepage or on the city's YouTube channel. If you are attending remotely, please be aware that the Zoom feed provides the closest to real-time stream. If you rely on the other feeds and you wish to make comments, please be aware of the time lag on those feeds. The first item on our agenda is the land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudene, meaning over in the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments remove the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threaten to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism. Staff, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Ham,
Here.
Commissioner Hickey,
Present.
Commissioner Lehman,
Here.
Commissioner Tagney,
Here.
Vice Chair Strickland,
Here.
and Chair Simmons.
Here.
We're all present.
And I will note that we are joined by Community Development Director David Loya and, sorry, I'm forgetting your title.
Deputy Director Jennifer Dart, sorry.
Deputy Director Jennifer Dart. Next, we have oral communications. During this time, people may make comments about items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on one of our agenda items, you will have an opportunity when we are discussing those items. If you have comments about items that are not listed on our agenda today, please line up now behind the lectern. If you are on Zoom and you wish to make comments on matters that are not on today's agenda, please raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen, or by pressing star 9 on your phone. The clerk will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. With that, I'd like to open public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to comment during early oral communications. Feel free to state your name for the record. May we have the first speaker, please? No one in the audience, no one online. With that, I will close early public comment. Next on our agenda, we have the consent calendar. We have one item on consent today, which is to approve the Planning Commission minutes from our regular meeting held on February 24th, 2026. Would any commissioner like to pull the item, or do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next, we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move on to business items. Our first business item is to adopt Resolution PC 2601, recommending the City Council accept the 2025 General Plan Annual Progress Report. Could we please have a staff report?
Absolutely. So I made you a quick slide. I won't go into too much depth with the APR. I think pretty much everyone here has been through one of these prior. So you know the format. The state, let me set up our little slideshow here. Okay, so the state requires cities and counties to submit an annual progress report on our status of the general plan every year by April 1st. And it's the Office of Planning and Research that requires this, so that's who we're going to be submitting this to. We also have a separate housing element report that is an additional state requirement that's submitted separately, but we do include housing element information in the general plan report for your review. So we kind of do it all combined at one time so that you're not having to have two of these. So we're going to give you both of them at the same time. Since this report is a little bit dry, I wanted to give you some pictures so that you could see some of what's been happening in relation to our general plan and kind of go through some of the projects. So construction began on the Annie Mary Trail, which connects downtown Arcata, Cal Poly Humboldt, and Valley West, all the way to the pump station at the Mad River, which is fantastic. I'm sure you guys have seen that happening right now, so that's exciting. And a couple of the pictures, the one up at the top in the middle is from that, and then obviously the one on the bottom left-hand side. The city also continued to implement its art strategic plan with another call for arts in conjunction with our Playhouse Arts local arts agency. And so that's the picture there on the right. So you'll see some additional art coming to the city soon with that call to arts. There was a water line replacement, so that's an ongoing project. That's the picture there up on the top left. And then the picture in the middle is our recreation department. So they continue to offer summer camps and break camps and all kinds of different youth and adult recreational opportunities, basketball and pickleball. So a lot of fun things in recreation. They always have the best jobs. On this slide, you'll see some additional art that's up at Carlson Park, the frog there on the top left-hand side. And the city contracted with Civic Possible to complete our economic strategic plan. That's down at the bottom left-hand side, and that's ongoing, so there'll be some more information coming next year about that. The slide in the middle is, it's kind of a twofer. So it was the two projects in one. So on the right-hand side of that fence was the Little Lake cleanup, the environmental cleanup of Little Lake property. And at the same time, or kind of shortly before, on the left-hand side, there was a sidewalk improvement to connect the marsh along that property. So that was another fantastic project that was funded from Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities in connection with the Sorrel Place project, the affordable housing project. Something else I wanted to highlight was the mobile home on the right. So we have a mobile home ownership rehabilitation program, which is a grant-funded program that allows low-income residents in mobile home parks to do upgrades and or potentially, in this particular case, if their unit was so dilapidated that it really couldn't be upgraded with just some construction, to get a new unit. So this is a new unit that was installed for a low-income homeowner today. So, yeah.
Jen, could you describe the cleanup at Little Lakes?
Yeah, so Little Lake was an environmental cleanup project. So it was a dioxin site. It was a brownfield site. And we've been working on getting that cleanup with EPA funding for quite some time. So does that describe it enough? David might be able to give you more background to it too. It was a redevelopment site that we purchased 15 years ago or so.
And you scraped up the soil and removed it?
Yep, scraped it up and removed it. And then at the same time, I should have put in another picture, we actually moved a wetland, which was interesting. So they lifted it up, moved it, watered it the whole time that this was happening, and then lifted it back up and moved it back and put it back in place, which was an interesting project I had not seen before. And I have some pictures of that. I should have put one of those in there. I didn't know.
Are you open to more questions?
Yeah.
As you go?
Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't heard of the City of Arcata landscape report. Can you just give me a
Yeah, the
little
City
bit
of
about that?
Arcata, yeah, the City of Arcata landscape report is kind of an initial report from our Civic Possible, who's doing our economic strategic plan. And it collated some information from one-on-one meetings that they had had with different members of the community, business owners, people who do financing, lending. There was a wide variety of people that they met with, and they came and did one-on-ones for about a week, and then recently held they were invite-only meetings kind of with that same group to go through what was in this landscape report. So the landscape report will actually be public up on our website at some point soon, but they're going to be incorporating what came out of those two meetings and trying to distill it down to something that's actually doable. So what we're looking for is 4 to 5 different projects that the city can actually undertake in that plan. So we're trying to make it a really targeted plan. So that's what the landscape report was kind of big. It was like everybody's survey results and things like that.
Does it have anything to do with shrubbery, or is it not that kind of landscape?
Not that kind of landscape at
Okay.
all. It's
Thank
the
you.
economic landscape.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I actually, because you brought up the mobile home rehab program, this is one area of the update that I just had a couple questions about. Super exciting that, and also the promotion of owner occupied units. I remember that's has broad support in the community. But it's kind of difficult to read from the update for things like the home buyer assistance program for purchase of community land trust homes how many of those homes we have, like what's the subscription of those programs, also for the assistance for mobile home purchases. So just any sense of scale you can give us on
Yeah.
those.
So we've assisted currently, I believe, 19 of the mobile homes in the park with the MORE program. We anticipate getting to somewhere between 30 and 40 before we run out of funding for that program. And this was one-time funding from the state. And they are grants. So that is with this income, the income levels for this particular, for people who own these homes, particularly doing a loan is just not feasible for them. So it's really important source of funding. But yeah, we're going to hopefully assist around 40 people with that program. The Community Land Trust program that we have is an ongoing program for our ongoing land trust homes. So we have a partnership with, it used to be Housing Humboldt, now it's Rural Communities Development Corporation, I think. And they manage a community land trust. And when someone sells, they want to maintain those as part of our first time, our home buyer. So we've created a program specifically for those. There haven't been any added since the land trusts back in, I think, Janes Creek, which was maybe in 2012, or is that maybe a little earlier than that? But yeah, unfortunately, no new community land trust homes have been developed during that period. There is another program, though, that I wanted to highlight, which I thought we put it in the report, but may not have. It's the CalHome home buyer assistance for mobile homes. So a first-time home buyer could come in and purchase a mobile home in a park with that program. We've had some really difficult times with that program. So what we did last year was we actually created a program for us, the city, to be both the primary loan and the secondary loan, because CalHome can only be used as secondary financing. And we could not find a lender who was willing to be a primary loan ahead of us on a mobile home in a park. So we created that program, and we actually have 2 applicants. There's not a lot of funding for this program right now, but we do have 2 applicants who are going through the process currently and are qualified, so looking for homes right now.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the projects. Oh, and I have the Cal Poly. That was the last one that I didn't get to yet. And I just highlighted this because I think it's an important project for the city. And it shows our collaboration with Cal Poly and our continued and ongoing relationship with Cal Poly. We were able to go to their grand opening. It's just a beautiful site. The bike parking that you can see there is always full. And the connection with the trail is going to be just a fantastic accessory there, I think. So we're really excited about that project. Although it's not a city project per se, we just really do feel like I wanted to make sure that it was included in this. The other thing is we can't include it in our housing element report, so we don't get to include those numbers. So I really wanted to make sure that it was in this report. And then the last slide that I have is the housing element progress. So we did a little bit better this last year, 2025, than we did the previous year. We had a couple of multifamily projects that came in, so that bumped that number up. We had about 10 accessory dwelling units, and we're at about 91% of our overall housing element. We do continue to lag, as you can see, in our above moderate category, and we have 1 remaining low-income unit, which I really wanted to try and figure out a way to make that happen. But with the way that the formula that we put into our housing element for counting accessory dwelling units as low income, I couldn't make it work. It rounded down, so I could only put 4 in. So next year, we will meet that goal. Any questions on the housing element?
Yeah, there's a chronic need for above moderate units in Arcata. And I've said this before, I see my colleagues at the university living in Eureka or McKinleyville because they can't live in Arcata because there aren't houses available. What can we do about that? Do you have ideas? I mean, what as a planning commission can we do to help that out?
That is a really good and tricky question, because how do we make ownership opportunities? How do we require ownership? We've looked at this a lot. We are going to be starting our new housing element, so that is something that we can brainstorm more around. And David's going to reach for his mic here because I think he has some ideas too.
Thanks, Jen. Certainly didn't mean to cut you off in any way, shape, or form. I did want to just also remind the commission that as we were going through the Gateway Area Plan, sort of one of the models that we were operating under the assumption of is that if you look at our single-family neighborhoods, they're predominantly renters. There's not a whole lot of home ownership in Arcata. In fact, our home ownership rates are down at the low 30%. And, whereas the state is closer to the high 30%, low 40%, and nationwide, they're in the mid 50s to 60s, depending on where you're at. So our home ownership rates are low. Without going into, reasons why that is, we know that it is. And so one way to boost home ownership, one way to boost the single family market is by freeing up that housing stock that's currently locked up in rental market. And the way we do that is by providing appropriate rental housing stock. The city of Arcata really since the 50s hasn't had, a housing growth that has matched its demand. And so we've had, very few projects that would accommodate the type of housing that most folks that are coming to Arcata to rent would like to see. Now, the rental market is obviously very diverse. You have families that are, coming to the area that want to rent a house as well. But predominantly those houses are rented by students is sort of the way that the theory goes. And so the work that we've been doing with the Gateway Area Plan and all of these other, densifications, over time will start to free up that housing stock, because when you have the choice between, maybe an older single family unit that's been, in the rental market since say the 80s or 90s and a brand new apartment, for about the same cost, the market's going to kind of drive you towards the apartment. So we definitely are going to be looking for opportunities in our new housing element, as Jim was saying, to, where can we expand our single family housing stock? But I think we also need to remind ourselves that part of the work that we've already done was predicated on this idea that we're going to free up the housing stock that's currently in the rental market. So that's where we're going to get some ownership from.
Can I tag on to that really quickly too, just to say that even the single family homes that have been built, because there have been single family homes in this housing element cycle, quite a few that have been developed, the majority of those are also being built and developed as rentals. Just to be fair, there's no mechanism for us to require even the single family homes that are developed to be ownership opportunities. And a lot of times they're being developed with ADUs or ADU and a junior ADU, and then all three of them are being rented out. So just to share that as well.
I'm going to tag team a little bit with Jen on this, and just one thing real quick, and that is that if you can build a brand new standalone single family house and make money by renting it instead of selling it, that's indicative of the problem. That's the indicator right there that we need to build more apartments.
I'm not opposed to anything we're talking about. I'll just also flag that you can have owner-occupied multifamily housing, like condos. And there was a lot of conversation about this during the Gateway Area Plan, where some members of the public wanted us to require that, which we didn't end up doing. But I do think encouraging that, talking to developers and saying, hey, it'd be great if there were some more owner-occupied multifamily in Arcata is something the city should also be doing.
Yeah, and we do have a couple of developers that are interested in that and are pursuing that. Unfortunately, the way that the insurance is structured around condos, it makes them really difficult to hold for the 10-year period that's necessary to. There's kind of like a 10-year period during which you're liable for the construction of the units as the developer, and so there's anything that goes wrong, they're going to come back to you to make good on that.
Yeah.
I have a question, but housing cooperatives are another ownership opportunity that can be scaled in both multifamily and the single family, just to put that out there. And my question was a bit procedural around, so it sounds like what you're providing is a summary now to HCD for the past housing element cycle, but you're going to start some conversations for the future housing element. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the plans there and any sort of community engagement that you might be doing?
Yeah, so I can talk about that a little bit. We are, right now, we're in the regional housing needs allocation process with our HCOG. So we're going through that process, and we haven't actually gotten our final numbers. I believe Eureka did, they did do an appeal to the way that the numbers, so we're waiting for that to kind of be done. But we are already looking at the timeline that we have and planning out, and there will be engagement opportunities. There will be a lot of opportunities for us to come here and talk to you all about what we're doing and what our plans are. One of the things that staff anyway is looking at is really trying to make whatever we put into this housing element actionable. One of the things that HCD is really looking at in the reports now is that we're moving forward with all the implementation measures that we have. And some of the implementation measures that we had in there were really just ongoing things, or maybe things that we knew, like, we're going to have to put this in here, but it's probably not going to happen. And really making sure that we're honing in on things that are actionable is going to be kind of the priority, at least from staff's perspective at this point. But there will be opportunities for engagement with that. We are going to be doing a flash vote at some point in the near future. We're looking at maybe May at this point is what I'm thinking, but that'll kind of start off the process. So
Yeah, I just
Also, just to add to that real quick, the city just got done adopting a brand spanking new general plan, and we did a lot of engagement for that. And so we're leveraging the work that we did with the community into this new housing element as well. So it may not be as robust an effort as we've seen in the past because we're scaling it appropriate to the amount of engagement that we just got done doing with the community.
I was just gonna bring it back to a previous discussion we had around like training and education opportunities, and just thank you for offering to have more discussions about it, because I think the community input is one side of it too, but I think for us to be tracking along with some of these contextual elements, like you provided, like the signals that the market is providing, we've just received some like pretty bleak demographic news, is like the California, biggest population shedder, interested how that would manifest locally and what the dynamics that incurs in our housing market. So just, just signaling encouragement of more like a deeper dive discussion on some of these things.
Did you have more for us, or is this your
Nope,
last?
that's
Okay.
my last slide. So any other questions? Happy to answer them.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I have one, which is the first page of this implementation measure and status. There, I'm just curious. You're talking about interested parties regarding redevelopment of a brownfield site in the Gateway area, and it was a former auto wrecking yard that they're trying to produce housing there. I'm curious, where is it and what are they doing?
So that's actually two things. So we always are trying to get any former brownfield sites to be cleaned up, and we would like to work with anyone who owns one of those to move forward with the cleanup. But I think that it's sort of separate. That's Gateway area, but staff is currently processing an application for a cleanup and redevelopment of Ford Auto Wrecking Yard. I believe what they're talking about is Rogers Garage. Dilo put this one together for me, so this was a collaboration, a team effort with each of the departments. So there is one other thing I guess I should share before. There were a couple typos and a few just cleanup things, formatting errors that I'm going to be fixing, and I'll give that to Rhea to include. So just wanted to let you know on page, I think 17 and 19, there were a couple little things. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I would just like to take the opportunity, because I'm curious, backing up to those previous photos, the picture of the water line replacement, how extensive is that going to be throughout the city? I see it jumping around.
Yeah, there's water line work going on all throughout the city. We are not replacing every water line throughout the city, but focusing on the areas that have the worst water lines But it's pretty extensive, and it's pretty exciting too, because we do have, a lot of water leaks because of the lines, the older lines. So this will be, serve the consumer better, and it'll make it so that we're more efficient with our resources.
Are there maps that we can view online or something?
I don't know if they're online, but I will check and report back. But certainly you can reach out to, and anyone who's interested can reach out to our engineering department. They have a map of where all the proposed replacements are happening.
Great, thank you.
I just have a question about some of the mitigation measures, specifically PF5, the Arcata wastewater treatment facility. It looks like the long-range feasibility study should be complete next week, and I was just wondering if that's something that we'll be engaging in, or is that at the city council level?
I would have to check with environmental services to see what their plan for adoption is, but if it's something that the planning commission wants to see, I'm sure that we can make a detour if you weren't on the roadmap already, and make sure that the planning commission can take a look at it.
I mean, it's a process question. It'll probably be posted online for just review by the general public, and yes, I'm happy to review it then, unless there's other interest.
Is there other interest in the wastewater treatment plant from anyone?
Maybe what we can do is have a presentation by environmental services just to update you, and we'll work with them to pull that together.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on the general plan update? I'll give just two quick things. Does HCD ever respond to they require you to send them, but do they ever give feedback or respond back? Like, what did they say last year after we sent it?
No, they do not. It goes into a black hole. And but to be fair, it's not HCD for this particular report. I harp on HCD too much. It's OPR. So this is for the Office of Planning and Research. However, HCD gets the housing element report, and many pieces of that they also do not ever review or respond to us about. So yes, no. Not
Sorry,
yet.
Jen, is it formerly OPR, now LCL?
It's the
Okay.
land use and climate innovation, Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, and I will say, because I sit on the let me see if I can get this done in one breath, the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Programs Technical Advisory Council for the Land Use and Climate Innovation Office. And they do crunch the numbers when they get these data, when they send out the annual planning survey to jurisdictions. They do compile that information, and they process it and use that to influence the ways that they're reaching out to jurisdictions and resources that they're putting online to support jurisdictions. So it does, to us, it feels like it goes into a black hole because we don't get so much as a thanks for submitting your report, but the data are actually used at a state level, and actually that's something, now that this comes up, I'll mention it to my colleagues on the TAC, that it'd be of interest to folks to get a response back, a report back, like this is what we're doing with the information that you're working so hard to put together.
We do put another report together, which might be, I think, more, David, what you're talking about, which is it's housing units like certificate of occupancies. They look at it a little differently than HCD does with our housing element. So I do provide another report that gives them that data. They already have that report. It doesn't actually have to come to you, but I could incorporate it in this if this is something that you're interested in. It's a little different than the housing element report, which is based on permits pulled. So you can see that, it's kind of a different metric, but I'd be happy to incorporate it into the report next year if that's something you're interested in seeing.
Jennifer, at some point, if we don't meet our RENA numbers, we do hear back, right?
Yes, absolutely. And they actually are looking at our implementation measures, and we have been getting, questions about where we're at in those, in tracking those. So yeah, they do communicate with us.
And just to disambiguate a little bit, this is the general plan annual performance report. It covers the entire general plan. The housing element's a section of that, and so we reported on it. What Jen was mentioning earlier about HCD, there's an entire separate report that we do for the housing element that is also a required unfunded mandate that we complete annually. And we do get tracked and monitored for housing element compliance through that process. That's sort of like, you know, the sort of worst case scenarios, you can get decertified from that process. Yeah.
Would they criticize us if one category is not met as opposed to all the the total number? I mean, the total number is really good, but that one category is not.
Yes, if you're not meeting one of your implementation measures, they will respond to you with a letter and list the implementation measures that they have concerns about, and they'll ask you to respond back where you're at in the process with meeting those implementation measures. So they do look at all of them, and it doesn't matter how well you're doing number-wise. They want to make sure you're still meeting those implementation measures, that you are meeting the timelines that you put into your housing element, which is why it's really important that we make sure that those are actionable in this next housing element. I think some of the ones that we put into the last one weren't perhaps something that we could attain during that time period.
They were fluff.
So are you going to hear it about the above average number?
I'm sorry, are we going to hear about our,
Are you going to hear back that you didn't meet the above average number in that table?
likely, yeah. Yeah, and there are actually Housing Accountability Act implications if we're not meeting our numbers. I don't know that we'd complain if we had somebody who wanted to come build a above moderate housing project. So wouldn't be bad.
All right. If no one else has any questions, I'd be willing to entertain a motion.
I will move to approve the 2025 General Plan Annual Progress Report and adopt Resolution PC 2601, recommending the report to the City Council.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, staff. Oh, you know what? I did not open public comment at all on that. But is there anyone online? All right. I'm sorry. This is why I have a script and I didn't follow it closely enough. If anyone ever hears this, you could have come in and said public comment and I would have taken it. Sorry. Okay. Second item. Consider approval of a gateway code zoning interpretation. Can we please have a staff report?
Let me pull up a very extensive PowerPoint presentation that I've made for this discussion. I have a title slide and I have one slide. So yeah, I'm going to put the conclusion up here and I'm going to try and get through this in summary. And then if you want to dig into the detail, we can. And if you want to, I've kind of given two options for the conclusion of this. One is you affirm the zoning interpretation that I've made. The other is that you appeal it. There's a third path that's sort of in the middle there. If you're like, yeah, this is close, but we really would like to see you make this as a zoning interpretation instead. My ego is not tied up in this. I'm trying to do right by the process. And so I'm happy to go back and not go through the appeal process, but revise my interpretation. But I did want to present the full options that are available to you. Okay, so, we just adopted this form-based code, the Gateway Zoning Code, and we built into it the requirement that we come back periodically. And I can't remember exactly the number, but we were like, within 2 years or at the first project, whichever comes first, to have a check-in, and then periodic check-ins from that point forward to make sure that the code's working the way that we think it should. And I think this is a good process. Staff are constantly having these conversations, and it's really good to be able to have the opportunity to daylight those conversations with the Planning Commission and see, like, should we address these concerns that are being raised about the process through zoning interpretations, or do we need to go in and modify the code? And because this is a, brand new set of requirements, a brand new set of processes and policies that we're implementing, I expect that, there'll be a lot of learning that'll happen in the first couple of years here. We have our first couple of projects that are coming in that are really testing the code. And both of these early projects are actually existing buildings that they're looking to modify and to expand and to basically reuse the existing building. As you can imagine, the form-based code, we dreamed up all these great ideas about how we wanted the world to look. We didn't go and verify on a parcel by parcel basis that the world could actually look that way. But we expected that, as projects are coming in, roughly they'll be able to accommodate whatever our new codes were. We also, as you may recall, had a conversation around expanding non-conforming uses. In particular, we had a couple of businesses that were concerned that they were being written out of the future of Arcata, that their time was limited, and if we treated them like we treat typical non-conformities, we were essentially threatening their business and their business model. So this was a critical concern for several businesses. We also had people who asked questions like, well, does that mean that I can't build an ADU if I have a single family home that's in the gateway area, because you're envisioning these, massive structures, well, what if I wanted to, add a bedroom or add a family room or something like that? Can I not do that? So we got real creative in our non-conforming code in this document, and we made it so that there was a pathway for primarily the Planning Commission, but on some levels, the zoning administrator, to be able to assess whether or not a nonconformity was, an expansion of that was either de minimis, or if the expansion of that nonconformity was actually consistent. Even though it didn't meet the code, it was consistent with what our overall objectives for the area were. We also included a pathway if someone came in and they didn't want to apply the code standards, but they came up with something that was really cool that we just didn't think of, and we wanted to make sure that there was a pathway to allow them to to approve that. So you can imagine taking 3, or maybe if you had a combination of those kinds of things, 3 or maybe several different flavors of different projects, and trying to subject them to a limited number of processes that are similar enough so that we didn't have 5, 10, 15 different processes you go through. We just have a few. That's what we envisioned when we built this code. And that's what these early projects are testing us on now. In order to do this, we had a couple of different options. One was to add a design review process. Now, you're familiar with all of the work that we've done around the Housing Accountability Act, that most housing projects can't be subject to a discretionary approval. Design review has to be objective. That's how we responded with our form-based code, objective design standards. You come in and you apply those, you go straight to building permit. If you don't want to apply those, then you don't get that same sort of ministerial pathway. You have to go through some process. And so design review is the typical way that we've handled this before. Design review allows the commission, or if it's a zoning administrator, to review the projects and be able to evaluate, do they conform to, our understanding of, meeting the design of the community conformity, and those kinds of things. It also allows for, these smaller projects in the Gateway Code where it's just a de minimis project, maybe an expansion of family room. We could say, hey, look, it's really not changing the site all that much. and we can go through and approve it through a design review process. However, in order to make sure that we were adhering to the principles of the Gateway Code, we also layered in this gateway use permit. And we applied that to anything, any way that you get to not getting through the ministerial pathway, you go through a gateway use permit. And that gives us the option to be able to say yes to projects, even if they don't conform to the code. So we were trying to exert maximum flexibility. When you exert maximum flexibility, you also tend to exert a lot of process to go with that maximum flexibility. Because we want to make sure it's not just Wild West, go ahead and do whatever you want. We came up with these standards, and you know, we still want to be able to say no to some things, but we want the option to say yes on the one hand. On the other extreme, you could say, well, the only projects that can be built are the ones that meet the code. And so that, you know, that both those options, the Wild West and the, you know, very constrained options weren't good. So we built in this flexibility that led to this additional process. You can get to a gateway use permit either by a new build that doesn't conform to the standards, an expansion of an existing build that doesn't meet the standards, or, you know, other modifications that for whatever reason don't trigger those ministerial permits. Like you came in and wanted to build something that didn't have a housing component. So now we've got two processes. We have a gateway use permit and we have a design review permit. To complicate matters further, when this code refers you to design review, there are many design review projects that we said, those are now ministerial. We don't want to have, you know, some big hearing over someone, you know, expanding their family room. So you get into this sort of like catch-22, if you will, but the catch-22 has like a positive outcome and that the answer is yes, go ahead and do the project. You come in for a expansion of your family room in the gateway. We say that doesn't conform to the code. You have to get a design review. It says use the design review standards. You go to the design review standards and I look at this project type and it says no design review required. So I just went through a big process loop that says we're not reviewing this project, go ahead and do it. So here's where the rub comes in though. Because the gateway use permit was designed so that it was similar to the findings that you have to make for a use permit, but then layered in a couple of findings that would help us to further the policy objectives of the gateway. And so we added several, you know, findings that were exclusive to the gateway use permit. And those are on packet page 44 of 45 under the gateway use permit non-conforming expansion, for example, where you have to make the findings A, B, and C that the expansion occurs on the same parcel of the existing non-conforming use. The use is not heavy or moderate impact manufacturing processing, and the review authority finds sufficient measures are incorporated into the design to reduce the offsite impacts associated with the aesthetics, odor, and noise. Peter?
David, what's the difference between a gateway use permit and just a use permit?
So the gateway use permit has these additional findings, and that's pretty much the only difference. The process is almost exactly the same. And you still make the main findings of a use permit, you know, not going to impact, you know, public health and safety, et cetera, not conflicting with a code, et cetera.
So if a project is in the gateway area, it needs a gateway use permit, not a regular use permit. Is that correct?
If it's in the gateway area and it doesn't meet the requirements for a ministerial permit, that is, that it conforms to the form-based code and it provides a minimum level of housing, that would put it into a ministerial permit. If your project doesn't conform to those two bright line standards, then you have to get a gateway use permit. A gateway use permit is required for any project that doesn't meet the ministerial standards. Projects that are not conforming with the design standards, projects that are expansion of a non-conforming use, all of those kinds of projects would not meet those standards, so all of those have to get a gateway use permit.
Sorry, David, can you then layer in the design review into that explanation?
Yes, and they layer the design review in as well.
I, I still don't quite get this. What's a use permit compared to a gateway use permit?
I think David was building up to like the rub of the decision that we have to make right here, and maybe this will make more sense if we focus on that, just rather than all the small details.
Yeah,
that get that.
and just to hit the the nail on the head for Peter, your question. The difference is that you have to make these additional findings, and those findings are tied to the purposes of the gateway. So you don't conform to ministerial standards, but we want the project anyway. This is the maximum flexibility part. We want the project anyway. How do you get that project? Through a gateway use permit.
Okay, one more time. Is a use permit what you need outside the gateway area in Arcata?
You would need a use permit outside of the gateway for many different kinds of projects. We don't have a use permit anywhere else except for the gateway for design standards or, not having met this ministerial standard. So it's a special permit type. We could have called it anything. We could have called it a, gateway flexibility permit. Maybe that would have been better to distinguish it from a use permit.
Or just called a gateway non-ministerial permit.
Yeah, or a gateway permit. Let's shorten it even further.
Is the main distinction about the gateway use permit in terms of findings providing housing? So all businesses in the gateway zone that, oil change stations and things like that, if they want to expand their facilities or something, but they're still not going to provide housing because that's not their thing, that's the rub. That's the challenge. Is that correct, roughly?
Yeah, so in that instance, they would be not providing housing, and they would also be expanding a non-conforming use. And so they'd require a use permit, gateway use permit, for two reasons. So to Matt's point, like if we follow the permit processes, the question came up among staff, do we make people go through all of these processes? And my interpretation basically is largely yes. If the conclusion is up on the board here. If you're a project that's been submitted and you're in the gateway and the project is modest, but provides or non-conforming and provides alternative means and provisions to meet the code. Or if you come up with some novel way of providing what the code is asking for, what the policy is asking for, then you are subject to a gateway use permit. You will also be subject to a design review. So those two things go together. So if you don't qualify for the ministerial permit, you have to get a gateway use permit, and the procedures, including the findings, noticing, and hearings process for the use permit process established in the use permit section, are the procedures that you use. So you use all of the use permit procedures, but you also use the findings in 9110.020 D4. And then in addition, if your project is an expansion of a non-conforming use, and that's how you got yourself into this flexibility in the first place, you also have to have subsection D5. So what that would mean is that projects that are not an expansion of non-conforming use don't have to make D5, and projects that do have to make that additional finding. So I feel like this is a fairly straightforward zoning interpretation. There's a lot of complex moving pieces to it, but essentially what I'm saying in this zoning interpretation is you apply everything in the process if you don't meet the ministerial requirements. You have to do a design review, whatever that process looks like. It might be shoot you out the other end with no process at all. You also have to do a gateway use permit. And then the findings under D5 only apply to expansion of non-conforming. And then I give some alternatives here.
Are there any buildings in the Gateway area that aren't non-conforming?
I don't know that I could answer that question. My guess is no. And the question is, yeah, the next follow-up question is, if you're going to do anything to any of those buildings, any building in the Gateway, what do you have to do? You have to come in for a gateway use permit and a design review. And if you're expanding a non-conforming, like if you're not modifying the exterior at all, or the use that you're doing inside that building is not non-conforming, and you happen to be expanding the use, then you're not necessarily subject to the use permit on those grounds, but you're still going to end up having to do a use permit if you're modifying the building, because you don't qualify for the ministerial permit. I did give a couple of options towards the end here of other interpretations that could be made. And we're acknowledging in the staff report that there's a lot of duplication in here. We could have created an entirely new process to try and deal with this. But again, I think the different flavors that we would have ended up with, we would have been challenged to come up with one process that essentially did what we already have other processes to do. And so it's a little bit of a rabbit hole that you have to go down with each project to see what is the actual steps that you need to take. So you're going to end up with duplication. Some of the findings for a use permit are the same as those for a gateway use permit. Some of the findings for a use permit are similar to those for a design review permit. But I'm just saying we make all of the findings, I'm saying we make all of the findings for all of the processes. And if after some practice we find a shortcut, a better way of doing this, then we'll propose that. So yeah, again, I say in the staff report here that this interpretation really only has implications for projects where they're trying to reuse the building because they're unlikely to meet those form-based code standards. There are going to be, setbacks and et cetera. Many of these projects aren't going to be large enough to give us all of the build out for the gateway. So for example, one of the projects that's coming in, for us to ask them to do everything that's required in the form-based code would be a significant departure from the Nolan-Dolan sort of nexus and proportionality standard that we have to apply on these projects. And so we're looking at, taking, alternatives like asking for easements where we would want a future, pedestrian-friendly zone, for example. And instead of having them build out that pedestrian-friendly zone, we take the easements now, and then as a project comes forward and we're able to fund that project through the city, we have the area to do that expansion onto that private property. Instead of making them do it now where it's, drastically disproportionate to the cost of their project to have them do that. So we're kind of trying to navigate the code a little bit like that.
May I ask, is housing associated with either or both of the projects?
Currently, one of the projects proposes housing, and it has some pretty significant nonconformities. That particular project is actually in the coastal zone, and the gateway code is not truly effective fully in the coastal zone. So depending on, when it's reviewed and how it comes in, we may deal with those nonconformities in another way. The other project doesn't propose housing at all, and it's a reuse of an existing building. And it's a great project. They're doing all kinds of really great things with it. It'll be a planning commission design review and gateway code, so you'll get to see that project.
David, in your estimation, is the process you're proposing, is it going to lead to real changes in the Gateway area? Are people going to be daunted so they don't do things because of the process?
I mean, I hope not. This is something that I think our periodic review is intended to flesh out. We required housing to get a ministerial permit, and we required that you build fairly dense in order to get a ministerial permit. And so I think we had the conversation all the way along that a lot of folks that own properties currently aren't necessarily going to have the capital capacity, experience, whatnot, the wherewithal to do these large scale projects. So we went in eyes wide open. That was part of the reason we built in this additional flexibility to require gateway permits for projects that came in that were smaller. But it's certainly a policy decision that the Planning Commission and the City Council need to take into consideration when considering how do we apply this code in the future. We're starting to see a mix. I mean, we're starting to see people come in and get excited about proposing larger scale housing projects. We're also, I've been approached by someone who's concerned that the current mixed use requirements in the downtown might prevent a rebuild at the fire block. So it's something that we're going to have to take into consideration. They're actually asking for more housing. They want to see more housing allowance as opposed to less. So all indications leading up to the adoption of the Gateway Code were that people wanted to be able to build denser projects with ministerial pathways that included housing. The indications that I'm getting on the current market is that that's still true. And we'll just have to see as projects come forward and test the code whether or not we hit it right. So that's our objective. We want to modify the code to make sure that we get the kinds of projects that we're that we need in our community.
Ashton, did you have a comment or a question?
It was kind of similar to Peter's. I guess for these interpretations, would these apply to the projects currently in review? And are you noticing that there's any sort of like hesitation from that non-residential development, for example, around this, complex process? And I also will say, as someone who's navigated plenty of municipalities' planning codes, that circular getting through the code in multiple different ways to find the outcome is actually like struck out in an ordinance that was adopted like 4 years ago or something. Like, it's a nightmare, but it's just kind of part of it all. And I don't know that there's like a better way to handle some of these things. So,
Yeah, it's sort of the nature of the beast. In our design review, which was one of the first big pushes towards ministerial permitting that we did, there was a lot of concern in the development community of our planning commission and the council that planning permits were taking too long to process, and that they were too expensive for the level of feedback that we were getting out of the permitting process. And so, one alternative would have been to say, hey, look, no more design review. If you build according to the building code, then, we're fine with that. The decision makers didn't want to quite go that far. So we wanted to parse out, projects that are really big or projects that are on the plaza. We wanted to have all these carve outs for different kinds of projects where we wanted to have additional review. And I think creating that complexity in the code just necessarily ends up with these procedural loops. And, we're used to navigating them. With this particular project, there's a really small amount of additional floor area. And they're in fact coming in and doing a really amazing job architecturally and aesthetically. There's a whole lot of landscaping. You'll be happy about that, Commissioner Tagney. And it's a great project. The type of design review that we would do, if not for the Gateway Code, if we were just looking at this as a design review, it would have been no design review required. It would just go to building permit and we'd verify that it meets the code. So that's the level of design review. So the fact that it tells you in the gateway code that you have to do design review, there are other parts of the code that tell you have to do design review too, and you have to follow the table. So you go to the table, and what does the table say? The table says you don't have to do design review in many of these projects. I haven't seen that this is, soured these first couple of projects. I mean, one of the developers is, has some anxiety about the process, just because they are proposing something that has some non-conforming, existing non-conforming, and they also want to, get exceptions to the code standards. And we're trying to really work with them and encourage them and let them know that, we want to see the project and we're, working with them to get that project done. I think that anxiety may be more a function of just not having gone through the process than it is, that this procedural morass that we've created is confusing. That's part of the reason why I'm bringing this interpretation, is so that my staff can feel confident applying these kind of in the background, so that, folks are trying to go through this process. We can just give them an answer and say, this is the process. And they don't have to think about how confusing it is and bouncing around between the different parts of the code. The design professionals out there will have to learn this stuff eventually in order to effectively propose projects. And so, I think that the simple answer, the straightforward, is, as Joe Mateer used to always say, I'll intone Joe Mateer here, the best streamlining is follow the code. So if designers come in and they go through the ministerial process, that's going to be the most straightforward. But with this interpretation, I think we can help other people who are coming forward to navigate it as best we can. Of course, we have to layer into this that half the gateway, roughly, is in the coastal zone as well. So there's another complexity that we're working through right now.
Are you all developing a list of exemptions from any of these things? Just if it is below a certain square footage, or, no street frontage visibility or something like that, that would kind of negate these additional steps in the process for those, just understanding that it is mostly existing stock would be non-conforming use. And for those who wanted to make any sort of like infrastructure repairs or whatever to their site, or rehabilitation or expansions, just so that it is like potentially available for it to be more streamlined, and I guess in some ways to not discourage any sort of development in that area that wouldn't be, because I understand this code to really want to prioritize and streamline dense housing, which is awesome, but also I don't want to deprioritize like investment in existing businesses and like rehab of existing non-conforming uses to a certain extent, obviously, so I'm wondering if you guys are developing any sort of like list of exemptions.
Yeah, to date, we haven't. Again, we have just a few projects to reflect on. I definitely think that would be a good policy conversation at the upcoming study session with the council, in particular because every nonconformity that you allow, every expansion of a nonconformity that you allow is taking you further and further away from the vision that your code had in the first place. And I think we recognized, that in this particular instance that, there was already a lot of investment. A lot of folks had already, sort of transitioned the area. It's no longer truly a light industrial area as it's zoned. It's got a lot of different kinds of uses. And so, the flexibility that we put in, allowing for the gateway permit, I think is, what was our attempt to sort of balance that policy desire to encourage projects, but also not get too far down the road of nonconformity. It's not to say that we might find over time, some, great examples of a, handful of project types that we're just like, look, just don't even, bother with these. Let's exempt them.
A couple things. One, it's as a planner who's written on every single type of permit we're talking about, it's really easy to understand. But to Ashton's point, like it can be overwhelming the amount of documents you have to sift through to get to like what permit process fits my project. And so maybe a flow chart of some sort would be useful, like a visual aid for, it starts here and ends here, depending on the project type. And then second to that is the exemption discussion. Exemptions are such a double-edged sword because people are looking to those and get this false sense of security, like, oh, mine fits that, and so it's good. But then they don't account for the wetland that's too close or the setback. And so that's my take on exemptions. And I'll also say I don't think we've opened public comment yet. Okay.
Is anyone waiting to speak from the public, David? All right, consider public comment open and closed. Okay, I think we've had pretty robust discussion. Does anyone have any other questions for David? Yeah.
I guess just a minor one. In this last page where, you point out that the interpretation does result in some duplication, particularly between the use permit and gateway use permit on certain findings. Also that could be eliminated in the future through a code amendment. And I know that there's a fair amount, I think, of code work being done. In our previous agenda item on the general plan update that we saw, is this something that can get folded into that, or?
Yeah, I think it could. If we did find some, minor tweaks that we wanted to make to the gateway code, this would be an opportune time to do it. And your point to the flow chart was very well taken. I think we can do that. In particular, once we have this zoning interpretation settled, we can show that, like, if you're this project type, this is where you'll end up with. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
My only suggestion on the flow chart is that the follow the ministerial code has like some stars around it or something.
Well, it's just the really short version,
Yeah, it goes right to the end.
like Chutes and Ladders. Remember that game?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Folks, anyone want to move to approve a particular interpretation for David? Did folks agree with his interpretation?
I'm in support of David's interpretation.
I am too.
Is that all we're looking for? Is a straw poll or something here, or do you need a
I think a
formal-
straw poll would be fine, but if you did a motion and voted, that would be even finer.
How would that motion read?
If you move to affirm the zoning interpretation included in the staff report, I think that would be perfect.
Before we do that, I have just one comment. I often notice, just reviewing other reports in my work, there's usually a section for motion so that it's very clear what needs to be read aloud. It's especially when we're dealing with like legal processes. So maybe editing the staff report format to include a motion section. But other than that, that's all.
Seconded that suggestion.
Sorry, one last thing before we decide whether we want a straw poll or bring a formal motion, which is, David, at the beginning of the staff report, I think you mentioned, as projects roll in, we're going to start to surface some of these issues and there'll be further discussion. What's our next? Is it like the number of projects that trigger that, or are there certain intervals with which we can expect these kind of discussions?
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't know the timing off the top of my head, but I think it was 2 years or the first couple of projects. Once we've gotten through those, that we would, come back and review it. And I think there's even a period included in there, like every 2 years, which is something that, honestly, I think that we need to be talking about it. I don't know that it needs to be codified, that we talk about it every 2 years. From a staff point of view, that's something we could probably remove from the code. But again, we can have that conversation when we get to the policy discussion with the City Council Planning Commission.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve David's interpretation of the zoning?
I'll move to affirm the zoning administrator's interpretation regarding the provisions of the gateway use permit and design review and Gateway Code 9/100/020C-D.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. All right. We are moving on to correspondence and communications. Is there any correspondence from the Planning Commission? Yeah, go ahead.
I will not be at the next meeting.
Thank you, Peter. I have a bit of correspondence, which is that Councilmember Stillman asked me to ask all of you to sign up for Flash Vote so that you can share your opinions with the city that way. Any correspondence from staff?
Yeah, I wanted to report back the great good news that the city council adopted the resolution for the local coastal element, and they introduced the ordinance for the coastal zoning ordinance, and they'll be adopting that on the 18th. So thank you so much again, and yeah, the council is moving forward with it.
Great. With that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.